Hi, and welcome to another live episode of Marketplace Masters, brought to you by Merchant Spring, the leading marketplace analytics platform for marketplace agencies and vendors. Here at Marketplace Masters, we strive to go deeper into the challenges that agency and vendors face to lift performance via practical actions and insights. I am your host, Paul Sonneveld, and today we're going to talk about the strategies, tips, and insider knowledge that will help you, your business, really thrive as a supplier on Walmart. I have invited Eric Smith to join us today and share his valuable perspectives on really how to achieve this. So allow me to introduce him. Eric Smith is the VP of Product for SupplyPike. They're a cloud-based tool that helps CPGs reduce revenue loss by automatically detecting and resolving retailer deductions and compliance issues. He directs the strategy and product development for the Deductions Navigator tool, a software product built to help suppliers manage retailer reductions. Thank you so much for being on the show today, Eric.
Yeah, excited to be here. Thanks, Paul.
And let me just say thank you for putting up with my voice. I'm a little bit, I've got a slight cold, so I sound a little bit like Barry White today. Thank you for putting up with those deep tones in your earpods there.
Well, that makes two of us. I'm a little hoarse today too. So
we'll both hopefully more than muddle through here.
Yeah.
Look, I'm really excited today because we get a lot of questions about Walmart, particularly from our Amazon vendor community. A lot of them looking to expand, are looking to do better on other retail platforms, and of course, Walmart is right at the top there. Maybe just let's start with a sort of broader question around, what are some things that, new suppliers to Walmart just don't realize when it comes to doing business with Walmart?
Yeah, it's a great question. We work with vendors all the time who either they've been doing business on Amazon or elsewhere, or maybe they're new to a company that's been in Walmart for a while and just kind of getting their feet wet. And there's so much to know about doing business with Walmart, but one of the things that we always talk about is just being mindful of the different ways that compliance programs, invoicing best practices, just all the gotchas that can cut into your profitability at Walmart. They are vast. And if you're used to a certain retailer coming into the Walmart space, you've got a whole new ballgame to learn and get up to speed. So with a retailer, with a customer the size, the scale of a Walmart, those types of issues can really stack and add up.
So yeah, I think you even got some material here around some of those. Do you want to just walk me through some of those issues that you see there?
So it's looking different at every retailer. So for those of you familiar with Amazon, you've got all the different programs that you're used to dealing with there, and Walmart's going to have a lot of parallels to that, but also some of their own little tricks and gotchas that are going to look different. At Walmart, we typically bucket deductions, fines, penalties into a handful of different buckets. By far the most common that we see vendors dealing with are going to be your deductions withheld from invoices. So shortages are far and away the most common within that bucket. Shortage deductions, you invoice for 20 cases, the retailer says they received 10. So they're only going to pay you for 10. They'll deduct the rest. Far and away the most common. What's unique about Walmart, whereas Amazon typically has a single deduction type for shortages or a quantity variance, at Walmart you're going to see many, many different codes. So that's, I think, what this slide here is showing. About a dozen or so unique deduction codes for different types of shortages. So they really start splitting hairs here. But highlighted there at the top, you'll see 3 codes. So a code 22, 24, kind of 25 with a bit of an asterisk there. But these are going to make up the most volume of these types of shortages. And so that's what you'll hear a lot of suppliers talking about when they're lamenting about deductions at Walmart. Typically there's 22s, 24s, and 25s. But that's far from the only bucket that we see. So those types of deductions with shortages, price variance, allowances, those types of things withheld from invoices are super common. But also with Walmart, you've got to be conscious of some really sophisticated compliance programs. Most people are familiar with Walmart's OTIF program, On Time in Full, which has been around for several years now. But there's a lot of nuance to that program to really mastering that. But they've also launched within the past year or so a new program called SQEP, or Supplier Quality Excellence Program, which is a new and very, very nuanced compliance program around how you're doing business with them, from your EDI documentation that you're transmitting to how you're packing and shipping product, everything in between. Really, it's a program aimed at getting some suppliers compliant so that Walmart can automate their receiving processes. So there's dozens of different types of fines that go with that, and that's being rolled out, or it has been rolled out over the past couple of years. And so a whole new program, if you've been away from Walmart for a couple of years and you're coming back fresh, something new to be aware of. We also talk about buckets like post audits are a really common type of revenue loss that vendors will see, which is essentially a catch-all true up that Walmart actually works with third-party audit firms to audit your business, look for areas that they may have missed, and basically come back around at the end. So a lot of retailers have similar programs. Walmart's is pretty notorious for going really, really deep into the weeds and oftentimes throwing a lot of spaghetti at the wall to see what sticks.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I've spent many years in a retailer myself, and that was a great lever when we were close to getting to reporting season. We would get the forensic auditors in, and they would obviously they were paid on a sort of no win, no fee basis as well. So they were very creative in finding all sorts of lost profit opportunities, as we used to call them. Things that were missed, not charged, and all of that. Just two minor follow-up questions for me here. As a new supplier, what is the biggest call it banana skin, or what are the biggest issue that I tend to like, or the trap that I fall into? Trap's probably the wrong word. It's I don't think Walmart's out there to get you, but sure. What is the thing that really slips me up?
Yeah, something I would pay very close attention to. Oftentimes we see new suppliers at Walmart. There's a lot of excitement. You're in this massive retailer. It's a big deal. And so they kind of gloss over some of the details of things like your vendor agreements or the contracts that you're negotiating, not paying very close attention to that, as well as things like initial item setup. A lot of Amazon vendors coming from that world are probably scarred and are paying a little bit closer attention to things like item setup. But skipping over the details early on like that is going to lead to a lot of cascading issues down the line. So, that's typically where we say, hey, pay very, very close attention. Make sure you understand the terms of your agreement. Make sure that you are invoicing per those terms, and make sure that when you're setting up new items that you are following Walmart's guidelines, everything from pack size to all the way down to how you're shipping. To make sure you're being compliant with those programs is going to save you a lot of headaches further on down the line.
My second question was around how does this manifest these issues financially? Obviously, we know from an Amazon point of view, Amazon will just deduct off invoice and go, hang on, I was expecting a lot more money, and gee, there's not that much coming through. How does that financial process work for Walmart?
Sure. Yeah, one thing that I'd say is a little bit unique about Walmart is that each of those buckets that we talked about earlier, from deductions withheld from invoices to their OTIF program to SQEP to post audits to you name it, they kind of have different ways that they will be siphoned off. Whereas a lot of retailers, compliance fines hit a check and look very similar to a deduction for a shortage or a price discrepancy. At Walmart, deductions are withheld from invoices when they issue that remittance, but OTIF fines are billed on a monthly basis for all orders for that month, and SQEP functions similarly. So those are going to come across looking very different to a standard deduction on a remittance. And so if your AR team is looking at your remittances, oftentimes it's like, okay, I see a shortage deduction, that makes sense to me based on what I'm used to. Now, what's this random line down here for deduction? That's not my invoice number. It looks a little bit different because it's a rolled up type program. Similarly, post audits are going to be withheld from checks and follow a totally different format. So they trickle off in kind of different areas. So it's important to understand what what each type of withholding means, how to identify it, and then where to go to track down backup information, what actually happened, because each of those live in different places within Walmart's system retail link.
Yeah. It sounds like I thought that the Amazon vendor side was rather complicated, but I don't think Walmart offers simplicity here either, right?
Yeah, it's tough to rank them, I'd say, but just in terms of my experience with both, I'd say that Walmart things spiral a little bit more at Walmart.
Yeah, interesting. Well, I'd love to get an example of that a little bit later. But so let me just sort of say at the high level, like, do all suppliers deal with this? Is this just everyone just puts up with it? I mean, what does it look like?
Yeah, so something that we have the benefit of visibility here at SupplyPike, working with as many suppliers as we do across the box. What we've been able to understand is this is not just an isolated issue. So if you're dry grocery, you're going to deal with this, and other categories, you're probably fine. No, this really is a pretty universal issue. Obviously, there's some fluctuation in terms of the severity from supplier to supplier. But what we see is, on average, suppliers are losing 5% of what they invoice on a regular basis. And so not insignificant. We've definitely worked with suppliers closer to that 20 to 25% range, which that starts to become an existential crisis.
Yeah, wow.
It's
big money.
Yeah, big money. And it's extremely rare for us to come across someone who's less than 1%. They'd be very buttoned up, doing very well if that's all that you're losing.
So if you're in the 5% range, that would be considered quite reasonable. Like the sort of the opportunity
average, at least,
to pull that back is limited, would you say, or you still find there's opportunities there?
I'd say at that 5% range, there's still some opportunities there to improve upon that. That's typically what we would call average when we begin working with the supplier. So you're in the middle of the bell curve there, but certainly still opportunities to improve. With Walmart, there are definitely buckets of types of deductions that are harder to prevent than others, where essentially it's due to just bad processes on the retailer side, and there's only so much you as a vendor can do to prevent that. Other areas where it's very clear you're shooting yourself in the foot, we can improve this, and that can reduce the inflow.
Yeah. So what areas are the most common, would you say? What are the issues in areas?
So shortages, I would say almost invariably across suppliers, shortages are going to be the most common. It's rare that we encounter a supplier who does not deal with those quintessential codes 22, 24, 25. If you're direct import, if you're DSD, something like that, you're probably dodging the bullet there. But otherwise, if you're shipping, especially through Walmart's DC network, welcome to the world of codes 22, 24, and 25, by far the most common. I think that next slide you had pulled up is a pretty important thing to touch on here. And it goes back to what I mentioned at the beginning, as far as things to pay attention to early in your relationship with Walmart. These types of issues stack. And so one issue with item setup related to pack sizes or item cost or something like that can lead to multiple issues. And each of those issues have to be tackled one by one to recover the money. So just because you can prove that, hey, this was a shortage deduction, it was invalid, therefore my in full fine for the OTIF program should also be invalid because I proved it was not a real shortage. That's two different disputes, two different teams at Walmart. SWEP fines would be a third type of dispute. So they don't give you the benefit of the doubt and go back and reconcile. So it's because of how things snowball like that, and because resolution is specific to each fine or penalty, it's far less work to take care of this on the front end than to try to come around later and clean up. Oh, I think you're muted, Paul.
I was going to say, what's your success rate in disputing some of these charges and shortages? What are the odds?
Yeah, that's one thing I think is pretty unique to Walmart. We certainly, we deal with retailers where the success rate of, say, disputing a shortage is below 50%. Even if you can prove it was an invalid shortage that you should be paid back, some retailers just don't play ball. To Walmart's credit, I will say they're one of the better retailers when it comes to repaying deductions if you can prove your case. And so, take heart there for those of you new to Walmart. With shortage deductions, as an example, we see win rates on average, and this is across categories, across supplier size. Win rates typically at least 75 to 80% for shortages. So very, very high likelihood you can get those repaid if you can prove your case.
So that, of course, this is all premised on the fact that there will be lots of issues and getting it back. But ideally, you're trying to avoid these in the first place, right? Not having any claims against you, much better than doing all the work.
Absolutely.
So, any suggestions you'd offer to our audience here in terms of, how do you deal with Walmart? How do you do this, properly?
Yeah, so I've mentioned one of those best practices, and that's item setup. I harp on that because it's so critical. Probably not news to those of you at Amazon. Paying very, very close attention to all the details of how your items are set up, from pack sizes to pack quantities to pricing, you name it. Making sure that that is absolutely accurate is going to save you a lot of heartache. Another very important thing with Walmart is just understanding their secondary packaging guidelines, how they expect products to be packaged in cases, how they expect pallets to be loaded, labeling best practices. Those types of things will help with the receiving side at Walmart as product is entering their network. Last thing I'll say is how you invoice as well, and specifically around timing of invoices. We've seen this be one of the simplest kind of best practices that your team can implement to avoid, especially a lot of the shortage type deductions. It's just making sure those invoices are not being transmitted too early. We know a lot of suppliers like to send that invoice out about the time a truck leaves the dock at their warehouse. More often than not, that's going to lead to a shortage type deduction. Best practice typically is to tie that invoice date to the MABD when goods are expected to arrive at a Walmart DC, and that can, just that simple timing change can
just
head off.
provide a little bit of buffer for Walmart to actually do the receipting and the processing and capture it in their systems before you trying to ask them to start matching off invoices against quantity received and all of that.
Exactly. And similar news to Amazon there, because so much of that process is automated on their side. Give a little bit of buffer room to allow things to settle in.
Yeah. Now, we spoke a little bit about what the win rate is and the fact that Walmart's actually quite reasonable in a lot of cases if you provide the evidence and all that. We haven't yet spoken much about the actual process for doing that. How do I, as a supplier, how do I go about, making a claim? I know there's so many different aspects. You already mentioned there's different teams. So how do I navigate through this?
That's one, I'd say, kind of pitfall that we see with a lot of teams coming into Walmart for the first time. Many retailers that we deal with have typically a single process for disputing any number of types of issues. With Walmart, there are multiple different dispute portals. So the way that you dispute a shortage deduction looks very different from how you dispute a no-TIF fine, which is different from how you dispute a SQEP fine, which is different from how you dispute a return or a post-audit. So, the process is going to vary a lot. Most of these processes are through various web portals. So within Retail Link or a similar system, a web form you're filling out, attaching documentation and submitting. Things like post audits are an email process where you're actually negotiating directly with the auditor. So not even directly with Walmart, it's with a third party auditor. But every process looks a little different. And we see that trip up some teams where a vendor is accustomed to their AR team handling disputes. They've got access to maybe a web portal where they see remittances come through and can create disputes with another retailer. So there's kind of one familiar process. With Walmart, that definitely splinters. And so, collaboration across teams, making sure your AR team is talking with your supply chain team, is talking with your account management team, because they're all probably using different portals for different things and may not realize, hey, I've got the portal for disputing this type of fine. I've got the portal for disputing this type of deduction. And that's where we see a lot of issues kind of fly under the radar and not get acted upon. Oh, I think you're muted again, Paul.
I was just thinking about, all the different portals that you're talking about, the processes, the email addresses. I'm just visualizing a series of bookmarks in my browser just to sort of deal with all of that. And,
Yep.
your point around kind of, cross-functional collaboration within your business to do that is super critical. How good or how quick is Walmart, if a dispute is valid, they agree to refund? I mean, how long does it take for them to settle a dispute? And how far back can you go as well? That's probably another interesting question.
Two really good questions, and both are things that we see vary a lot across retailers for sure. So I'll start with the how far back. General rule of thumb with Walmart, kind of a little bit regardless of the type of issue that we're talking about, is about 2 years. So things like deductions are almost always going to be a 2-year statute of limitations. Few exceptions here and there, sort of gotchas to watch out for, but generally with Walmart, 2 years is a good kind of ballpark to remember. Whereas, we see with Target, for example, that's going to be about 18 months. Kroger is really short, 180 days to fight a shortage. Amazon, we put 30 days on this slide with an asterisk. So those of you familiar with Amazon's settlement process or creating a case and entering into some kind of negotiation like that with Amazon, you can go pretty far back with that process. But for Amazon's initial dispute process, submitting a dispute through their portal, there's a really tight window of time where you can expect success with that. Otherwise, you're basically resigned to having to go try to negotiate through a settlement. So Amazon, we consider that window for best success to be pretty tight. From there, you can go back further. But yeah, 2 years for Walmart. Also something a lot of suppliers don't realize when we talk to a new Walmart supplier, maybe if they're accustomed to a Target or a Kroger, hey, go back 2 years. If you're brand new, not an issue yet. But as far as resolution time to hear back from Walmart on a dispute, it's going to vary depending on the type of dispute we're talking about. Right. The most common one that we talk with suppliers about would be invoice deductions. So those are disputed through a portal called APDP. I always think ACDC, but APDP is far less fun.
Close the yeah.
Yeah. APDP is a web portal for submitting those disputes. Historically, with APDP, we saw average review times. You could expect to have something done and closed out within 2 to 3 months at the most. More recently, recent development with Walmart, we've seen those timelines extend due to some changes in their internal process. So Walmart used to offer a settlement program similar to that Amazon settlement where you could hand them, 3 months worth of shortage deductions and say, I don't agree with any of these. And they'd offer you 60, 70% of what you think you're owed and meet in the middle and call it good. Walmart used to have a similar program. They've since done away with that altogether. It's no longer an option at all. So with that change, you have this huge influx of new suppliers who've never disputed through that web portal, having to do all their disputes through the web portal. And we've seen that really stretch out review times for Walmart. So the average that we're seeing now it's upwards of 6+ months that we're seeing some disputes before they get any kind of resolution or comment at all. We still see action being taken sooner than that, but it's a lot more common to see that multiple month delay.
Yeah, I see. I guess they've done away with the negotiating a bundle of claims together and really investigating everyone on single merit. So yeah, that by default, time and effort. It's understandable. We've gone pretty deep into lots of sort of aspects and facets here of this particular topic, but sort of before we wrap up, I mean, sort of going back up again, are there any other best practices that you'd recommend that Walmart suppliers implement or maybe tighten up if they're sort of already on their way? What best practices are you thinking of?
Yeah. First, really practical thing, I would make sure your team has a process in place to capture documentation that's going to do you favors if you need to dispute something. So real basics are going to be your shipping documentation because that's typically how you're going to fight, say, a shortage deduction. So making sure you have a process for storing that information and being able to recall it when needed. But other things as well, like any kind of communication with your buyer. So if your sales team is negotiating rollbacks or any kind of price moves like that, hang on to that documentation, store those emails, everything like that. Because with Walmart's post audit process, auditors are going to have access to emails, to any kind of communication between the merchant and the vendor. And we've definitely seen scenarios where an email can be taken out of context and it looks like you offered a price that ultimately was never agreed to or something like that. And that can lead to an audit that's going to cost you a lot of money unless you're able to provide the full context and say, no, 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 here's the full email chain. They never agreed to that price. So hanging on to that type of information is really critical. Maybe a little less tactical, but really something that's a best practice regardless of the retailer you're dealing with is working collaboratively across departments within your company. So often we see these types of issues fall onto the lap of the AR team because they're seeing the remittances, they're seeing deductions withheld, and if you want money back, it's on them to go figure out how to make it right. And that's just not really the way to handle this in today's day and age. The most mature vendors that we see are the ones where the AR team has a direct line to that supply chain team, who has a direct line to that sales or account management team, because so many of these issues, just because the problem pops up with the remittance, what actually caused that problem happened way further up the chain with something that was negotiated by the sales team or in fulfilling the order with the supply chain team. So if you're not working with those teams, you're really missing out, both in terms of being able to go out and prove that a fine or a penalty was invalid and get paid back. But more importantly, like you said, Paul, stop the bleeding, fix issues that can be fixed further upstream. And that's really hard to do if you're not all kind of working from the same page.
Yeah, absolutely. Hard to, a lot of these, certainly from my own retail background, these are complicated issues and you need people who are sort of are across the situation, who can dig up an email, who can help. Certainly, someone in a separate department is just going to struggle to get through it unless you sort of put all your heads and experience together in relation to that particular issue, for sure.
Absolutely.
Great. Well, we're almost about a time. I love these topics. For some of them might be very detailed, but this is kind of the challenging bits around the retailer relationship in many instances for suppliers. We haven't spoken much about what you do, Eric, and actually SupplyPike and how they help vendors in this space. Do you care to share a little bit around how SupplyPike really helps with revenue management?
Yeah, so these topics are near and dear to my heart because here at SupplyPike, we are a software company and our focus is specifically around what we would call revenue management. So areas where suppliers are losing money doing business with retailers. Our approach is we want to make those types of issues visible so that you know where the leakages are. We automate the validation to understand what was valid, what was invalid, as well as the dispute process. So being able to go out and challenge those invalid type deductions and be paid back, that recovery is a really powerful piece of our software. And what's really unique about our approach is recovery is hugely important, but that's just the base of the pyramid. Like we've talked about earlier, prevention is even better, right? So our approach is we want to help suppliers get paid, but also get better. So our software serves up insights. It picks out and identifies areas where you have common root causes that can be addressed. And we can help your company go out and fix those types of issues. So, our software is tailored to be very specific to the types of retailers that we work with. So we went deep into Walmart today, but whether it's Amazon or Target or Kroger, they all look kind of different, and our software is definitely set up to be very unique to each of those so that you can be most effective. We don't believe there's truly a one size fits all type solution for this. And if you're trying to skim across the surface, you're not going to be as effective as you could be. So we go really deep into the retailers we support.
Excellent. Yeah, certainly one of the clear things you've left me with today is how different just Walmart and Amazon are when it comes to these sorts of issues. And well, it's A, complicated, and B, different. And
Yeah.
You mentioned some other retailers there, and we could probably do another separate session on some of those
Sure.
because they'll have different processes and portals and systems and all of that again. So, but on that note, we are past the half an hour mark. So, Eric, as we wrap up, I want to just thank you so much for agreeing to be a guest on the show today. Thank you so much for the amazing experience and just that detailed, gritty insights and knowledge that you were able to share with myself, my audience today around how does Walmart really deal with all of these the ductures and shortages and various other things that come with it. So I just want to say thank you so much for being with us, and I look forward to doing another one soon, maybe on Kroger, or pick another retailer out of the hat.
There you go. Yeah, thanks, Paul. Enjoyed it.
Thank you so much. Take care. All right, everyone, that is it for today's episode. I hope you found that enjoyable, and more importantly, I hope you've walked away with some really great knowledge and practical insights in how you can improve your, Walmart 1P business. Until our next episode, see you then. Take care.